Hello, everyone. Going to be a little bit of a wait here before we kick off the webinar, waiting for people to join as it's the top of the hour. All right, looks like we got a bunch of people jumping in here. All right, well, I'm not going to keep you guys waiting too long. Everyone can catch up as they join. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Amissa, and I am the Director of Engagement here at UpTime Solutions. I'm super excited that you all could join us for this webinar today, where we're going to be talking about maintenance and reliability culture in 2026. Buzzword or buzzer beater? We will find out. There is some participation in this webinar, and here's a couple ways that you can converse with us during the webinar and ask questions for Q&A at the end. There's a little chat icon that you'll see down at the bottom for any comments or anything you'd like to add to the conversation as we're going through. Feel free to type your thoughts in the chat section. And then there is a Q&A little button too, and that is a great place to add any questions that you want to make sure are getting answered at the end of the webinar, because we will have time for that, and Jeremy loves to answer questions. So please enter any questions you have in the Q&A. All right, next. All right, so I am excited to introduce you guys to Jeremy Drury, and he is going to be our featured expert speaker today talking about culture. Jeremy, please introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Amissa. Yeah, my name is Jeremy Drury. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here at UpTime Solutions. Good day, everybody. Thank you for attending. I woke up with a little tiny bit of a cold this morning, so hang in there with me. Hope I don't, have any coughs or anything like that. But also, I think it's important. I'm going to keep the sports metaphors to a minimum today. I know it's March Madness. We had the basketball hoop on the opening screen. We're not here for sports metaphors. So I'll spare you all of that as well. So as far as me, as far as my background, I have a bit of a triangulation, of a background that perhaps maybe gives me a unique voice for today's topic at hand. I've spent most of my career in the industrial technology space. Plain and simple, I love cool tools. My favorite show, as nerdy as it is, used to be How It's Made. I used to watch every episode of How It's Made. I've walked many shapes and sizes of shop floors. Uh, but in addition to that, I've also, interestingly enough, spent some time in workplace strategy. Hint, that basically just means culture in many ways. And the third piece of that stool is I've been in executive roles for more than a decade now. So obviously that typically falls on, part of that responsibility is pushing and driving culture initiatives. So other than that, I feel like this picture is a bit of a fraud. You can clearly see that I'm a recently newfound and proud member of the Balds. I'm okay with that. And so on that note, let's go ahead and dive in here. So you can say that I've been orbiting around the word culture over the last years. Trying really hard to get to the bottom of why, frankly, it just doesn't culture just doesn't seem to work or just fit quite right. And while answers, admittedly, have been elusive as they are in this world of culture, one fact has remained really constant. When I ask people, regardless of industry, role, anything like that, what culture means to them in the workplace, I have rarely found an individual, if ever, that doesn't have a neutral at best, or most often a negative kind of emotional reaction to the word. And so where did all of this, go so wrong? So before we get and spend plenty of time unpacking that answer, I want to set two additional ground rules. First is the 80-20 rule. The very nature of talks like this are meant to serve a general audience. So I'm going to make some sweeping generalities, just part of the part and parcel for webinars like this. So inevitably, at the fringes, I guarantee you there are maintenance and reliability cultures out there that are undoubtedly crushing it. But that's not what we're here for today. I'm going to talk to the other 80%, the organizations that, what do they say, like couldn't find culture if it was the ocean and they were the beach. So yeah, there's always going to be nuance here. This isn't this isn't going to be a conversation of nuance today. We're going to kind of go with a bit of a sledgehammer at it. Secondly, research has shown that multitasking reduces productivity by up to 40%. Because at the end of the day, we're not really multitasking. We're just rapidly task switching. So realistically, you could either try and do two things poorly for the next hour, or just trust that, a quick and refreshing pause, may be beneficial before jumping in back into whatever you were working on. So all that to say, I really appreciate your attention today. Now let's get to work. Rather than starting with a kind of generic "what is culture" slide, I'm gonna make an assumption, and I'm gonna assume that all of us have some general awareness as to what culture is. So I'd rather point it towards our worlds of maintenance and reliability. Now, I would be recklessly foolish to generate my own definition for this. There have been industry titans before and beside me that have already done this super well. Ramesh at Reliability X, he literally wrote the book on this. So it felt like the best kind of epicenter to launch from. So from that book, I'm not going to read this whole slide to you, but at its core, in a reliability culture, it's the prevention of failures that become an emphasis at every organizational level. That's important. I love the bit about the entire workforce being focused on asset reliability. So that's ops, it's maintenance, it's engineering. Everyone's thinking and acting to ensure those bullets there. And it gets into things like fixing things quickly, getting to root cause. Action is taken to prevent future failures. So it feels very much in motion. And I actually think Ramesh may be in the audience today. So I have a little feeling of a bit of like a Daniel-san trying to teach Mr. Miyagi vibes at this point. But I'm going to take a few unique turns. But anyway, thanks for coming today, Ramesh, as well, and thank you for blessing this community with works just such as this. So at the end of the day, why are we here? Why did you make the time to spend with us today? I think at the end of the day, it's because that pesky, annoying word culture, it remains at the very center of everything we do. Why? Because people. Even particularly in maintenance and reliability, we see three common places where culture can show up at the macro level. First, we believe that culture drives reliability. Even the best maintenance strategies fail without the right team mindset. We also believe, too, tools do not fix culture. Oftentimes, they actually only magnify it. So data and technology work when teams act on them. I'll give you a quick story. So I had an old IoT company back in the mid 2010s, and we focused a lot more on like fluid analysis, fluid power, different things like that. And I'll never forget going into a customer who was really looking into our fluid analysis system because they were having contamination issues all over the place. And as I'm talking to one of the main persons there, I catch out of the corner of my eye, note this is a judgment-free zone, someone plugging a leak with a dirty rag off the floor. And so in good conscience at this point, I couldn't in good conscience position a contamination solution to them because stuff like that, the basics. I know exactly where your contamination is coming from. It's part of the culture that's there in how that works. And so again, tools don't fix the culture. And we also believe that number three, leadership sets the culture. So strong leadership creates the alignment between operations and maintenance. And I would also probably throw engineering in there as well. Because we feel it. We feel the maintenance and operations and engineering are often at odds, versus working together effectively. I'll give you another quick story. One of the customers that we work with, we put some of our condition monitoring equipment on some of their assets, and pretty quickly, one of our analysts something just didn't seem quite right. These assets were just beating themselves to death, and for what they were, it just seemed a bit anomalistic. Now, this customer had been using like quarterly or semi-annually walk-around equipment, and they were being sold right, wrong, or indifferent false narratives. They were seeing some pretty gnarly stuff in the spectrum and waveform and just saying, hey, replace this asset. But the ability to be able to do this continuously, the analyst was savvy enough to call the customer and to say, hey, this doesn't feel quite right. Why don't you just lower the speed of the equipment and see what happens. And sure enough, all that noise, all of the rattling and everything like that, really started to recede without any kind of throughput issues or concerns or anything like that. And through this story, we ultimately found that the maintenance group there, they were all like, "Oh my gosh, we've been saying this for years," and come to find out, this was a group that was expecting expansion, and so engineering, again, right, wrong, or indifferent, overbuilt these assets and installed them, and then operations was like, "Well, we got these workhorse assets. Let's run them. Let's run them really hard." And that was just unnecessary for their current thing, and so they were radically reducing the life of their equipment by not having that proper triangulation. And so it was a really refreshing opportunity for us to support them with data to say, hey, let us help you make better decisions. And so having that leadership ability to pull all those things together, is really important as a piece of culture as well. And so I'm going to take us back to English school today, and I'm going to give you a thesis statement, and I'm going to try and back that up with three key pieces of evidence before concluding. So a good old English essay. So what's my thesis and big idea here? It's frankly that culture may be the single greatest initiative for achieving peak reliability and maintenance performance. Yet, I think it's time to do a root cause failure analysis on culture because it ain't working. How can something so broken still be the answer here? Well, let's go and find out. But first, we got to understand a little bit more about why it's broken. Um, my belief, I think it's evidenced here, is that historic and current pitfalls of how we define culture are stuck and unfixable at a broader scale. So help me, and forgive me if there's anyone on HR that's joining our call today. We don't want any more pizza parties or ping pong tables. That is not culture. That is not the answer. We appreciate the goodwill that puts to employees, but you're in the generation where you're going to get memes to no end if the way to celebrate a quarter of good performance is a pizza party. We've gone beyond that at this piece. That is not culture. Um, and so if we're going to take this even a step further, let's get into some numbers. Um, Harvard Business Review did a great study a couple years ago that found that American companies are spending to the tune of $2,250 per FTE annually on what they call culture. Now, if you magnify that times the size of the American workforce, it gets into billions of dollars invested annually in culture each year. And what does that give us? More turnover, to the result of still today, we're getting around 3 to 4 million employees voluntarily quitting each month. And it's even worse in manufacturing. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics, manufacturing turnover is one of the worst offenders. It's around 40%. To magnify this, which we'll get back to, the aging workforce, I say that with love and kindness. So workforce over 55 years old, it's becoming less than about a quarter, just around a quarter of that workforce. And so we'll get to why that's a potential challenge. And so, look, at the end of the day, it doesn't take a rocket surgeon to do the math, and the math ain't mathing on this. But we're in sunk cost mode at this point. So how do we dig ourselves out? And I think it's going to start by understanding what we may have missed, and it's that very last bullet point right here. So let's talk more about that. I think we have a generational issue here. So the very way we work and the value we place in work has changed radically over the past few decades. For all intents and purposes, my dad, but especially my dad's dad, worked at one place his entire life. Everything was about building tenure, building seniority. Like that was the path to upward mobility and more money. That also means they tolerated a whole lot more BS, bad cultures, bad bosses, because they simply couldn't afford to start over. So flash to more modern cultures, and not only have we been told, my generation wants to come, rightly or wrongly, you can be anything you want to be when you grow up. So not only has that been, placed upon us, but now we've been inundated with choice. I remember going to the grocery store, 30 years ago, and I think there was like 3 barbecue sauces in the barbecue sauce area. There's like hundreds of barbecue sauce. How in the world? And this just gets magnified, all over the place on just how often we're just bludgeoned with opportunities for choice. So this has real consequences, both psychologically and in the workplace. So that means modern generations, Gen X to a T, but millennials, Gen Z. We want to stay mobile and agile, and we're sensitive. I don't want to say that out loud too much, but we're kind of on the sensitive side. We don't like something, we're just going to leave. Make matters worse, we are obsessed with believing that the grass is perpetually greener. So it doesn't take much of a financial carrot to jump ship, to jump ship. And that's a major burden of manufacturing environments, right? Hey, I'll pay you a couple more grand if you come here and do this over here. And so this is very much a culture problem. But I think the missing key is breaking down the word culture as it's made up of actually multiple parts. It's more than values, it's more than people, but culture is actually very much about the behaviors we want of our team compared to the behaviors that we're seeing. So now I think we're starting to be on to something here. But before we get there, let's make sure let's beat this horse a little bit more. Let's make sure we understand how brutal it's gotten out there from a culture standpoint. So most of these are from recent Gallup polls. Starting with engagement globally, just 21% of workers feel engaged, and that only ticks up to about 31% in the US. And that level of like loss of engagement equals loss of productivity is getting close to like $500 billion annually. So the theme that employees are showing up, but they largely feel emotionally kind of disconnected from the organization. Here in the middle, 8 of 10 workers do not strongly identify with their company culture. I think this next one's as good of news as we can get. But those that do feel connected to the company culture, hey, guess what? They're only 47% less likely to job hunt. So imagine how likely people are to job hunt when they don't feel connected. Hustle culture is real. 78% of employees are assigned new responsibilities without raises or promotions. I think we've all been in those conversations at some point in our careers. And burnout. 83% of workers have experienced burnout in some meaningful way. I think we all kind of know what it feels like to be burned out. So all that to say, hey, employees are feeling the pain, but they can be insulated a bit if they believe in the company that they work for. Now, the biggest alarm on this page is this last one, management. Only 27% of managers globally are engaged. And here's the part that, arrow right to the chest. Managers influence around 70% of their team's engagement levels. So if you have disengaged managers, that's only going to domino out among the whole team. And so I think we have a pretty sizable root cause there. Call that the manager's curse. We're going to get to that more in just a bit. All right, so let's dive back into behaviors. I'm going to make the argument to you today that if culture equals people, the very root of culture is therefore people in motion or behaviors. But are we really ready to reconcile, with that? And I think it's going to depend on how we interpret the word behaviors. So I think for our sake today, we're going to find that it's less about, good versus bad, think like parenthood, good versus bad behaviors, and more about the what, why, and how people's brains are working through their demands, their projects, their teams, their tasks. We get we get so wrapped up in performance, which is critical, that we rarely take the time to investigate the processes that people are taking to achieve said results. And I'll give you an example. How you or your team acts when nobody is watching is the best single auditor of your culture. Hint, this is behavior. This is a perfect example where, sure, good versus bad could come into play here, but this is actually a fascinating study and eval on how someone is processing their internal and external worlds and how that either predicts or justifies their behavior. Let me explain. Now, we have reached the apex of the nerdy stuff in today's presentation. So thanks for hanging in there with me on this. So let's get psychological for a second. We can pull up the old armchair in the psychology office here. So in its most simple form, the definition of behavior is what people do and how they act. If we want to get scientific and we want to expand that, it's basically the observable actions or responses of a person or an organism in reaction to internal thoughts, emotions, or external stimuli. Of course, there's a formula for it, but all that formula means is just that behavior is both a function of the person and their environment. So B.F. Skinner, he was kind of the founding father of behavior analysis. He created this thing called the ABC model, which just means antecedent, behavior, consequence. I'm going to keep it simple today, and I'm just going to say a trigger begets an action or behavior, which begets a result. And so what this slide tells me is that if you're paying attention to you or your team or your company, behaviors to some degree can actually be pretty predictable, which I think is going to be really helpful. And they can be predictable because triggers are predictable. That first, that A, the antecedent, that trigger can be predictable. There's a fairly common set of external or internal triggers that influence our behavior hundreds of times a day. Here's a few examples. Think about external triggers, triggers beyond us. Safety. Do I feel safe? The demeanor of my boss. We all know, depending on who our boss is, we'll act a little differently. Money, relationships, whether it's beginning a shift, end a shift. Sometimes we just trying to get home. Production inputs, influence, time and tenure, family and home life that obviously brings a lot into our work lives, processes, programs, and that's all the external stuff. Now we got to think about, inside of us. That's going to be experience. Some of us have imposter syndrome, meaning like, I've never done this before, versus overconfidence, our own motivations, memories of how things have gone before, stress, anxiety, overwhelm, anger, frustration, even excitement. Sometimes people make mistakes because they're just excited. They get moving too fast. But even things like hunger. Hey, I haven't had my lunch yet. I'm going to change my behavior because I'm just hungry. I'm just trying to go get a snack. And as our worlds have gotten bigger and more complex, it's far easier for our brains to short circuit or overload. I mean, think about how much of this is getting processed in nanoseconds. That we are so far removed from our hunter-gatherer ancestors, everything that we have to process today. So let me paint a picture for you on where you could see these triggers potentially influencing a decision. All right, so work with me here. Let's jump into this character. So now imagine yourself in a scene. It's the end of a shift, heading into a weekend, and your boss, who is known to have some anger management issues, can blow up, is about to head out the door. When that daggone pesky critical asset fails again due to poor lubrication. And even though you know this, you've tried but been denied the resources to initiate a proper lubrication program. Also, you and an equal colleague are up against each other for a promotion. How are you going to respond to this? So think about those internal and external motivations that's going to change behavior. And what's crazy, there's a whole spectrum of how this thing could play out based upon these behaviors here. So we're going to come back to this story in just a little bit. So now that we've got a better understanding of the triggers that can drive behavior, so the front end of Skinner's equation, if we go back to that formula, we can also come at it from the other side, the results side, because we do have a solid roadmap of the results from behaviors that drive winning cultures. So this sets the stage for a bit of a gut check or a barometer test for our teams and organizations. So we know, speaking in generalities, that top behaviors of high performing teams, we know what that feels like, right? It's clear and practical communication. We know exactly what's being asked of us. There's trust, both physically and psychologically. There's overt roles and accountability that's in there. Everyone feels like they're kind of in the shared goals of a better thing, and they're all because of that in a more of like a proactively pursuing kind of an environment. And so, from a tactical standpoint, things that you may see in a top performing behavior set. Hey, we got a good system of being able to clear work orders and document well. We've got shift change meetings, so there's no surprises. We own our mistakes and our misses. We do job tracking. We have a broader understanding of context. We ask why a lot. We have pattern recognition, opportunities to provide suggestions. And we also know that there's inverses to that, right? So on the other side of the fence, the monsters that creep up in our organizations, incomplete or fuzzy communication. Nobody really knows what's going on. We're cutting corners. There's little clarity or accountability. It feels very reactive. It's very firefighty, and there's resistance to change. So this thing comes in of like, there's vague work orders, zero documentation, maybe even skipping like lockout, tagout protocols. Jobs aren't getting finished. There's a refusal to adopt new tools, not doing root cause. There's an avoidance mentality, blaming, etc. So even if your team is more on the right side of this group, and we know that behaviors can be a bit predictable, can we actually change behaviors? The short answer is sure. Yeah, we can. The long answer is it's never that easy. So ProSci, who's the leading voice in change management, says that it takes humans, best case, with premium tools and support. That means we've got change champions, we've got change agents and change managers. It takes people at least 6 months to accept a new behavior, not adopt it, not racing to work every day saying thank you for this change. This is just getting to the point where mentally, like, they've just come to terms of this change, just to accept it. And so why is that the case? Well, because change is pain. I don't know if you know this or not, but psychologically, the same place that our brain processes pain is where it processes change. And so change and pain are intrinsically linked forever, from a psychological standpoint. And so, so taking that into practicality, this is what a modern simplified change management curve looks like, or what I've decided to call the nope rope, because most individuals or organizations, they lack the courage or the visionary thinking to embrace this pit of despair right here, where things have to potentially get worse, the pain, before they ultimately get significantly better. Hint, this is also why training and mentor programs typically stink. Individuals feel like they can't afford to take the dip of their own personal productivity to ultimately make their jobs easier. They would rather just do it themselves. Uh, and so this is why silver bullets seem so attractive. False promises to, avoid this curve. But newsflash, change is pain. That's a psychological impossibility. You're just asking for flatter growth and more stagnation. So, I'll say it again, and this may be a bit of a bubble bursting moment. There's no silver bullets here when it comes to maintenance and reliability culture. Amissa, you'll have to see if anyone abruptly leaves the meeting at this point. I hope not. But there is a community of really, really smart people, far smarter than me, standing in the gap of improving the maintenance and reliability world that you all should pay attention to if you're not already. And with all the things that they put out, two things have always stuck out to me. One, I love that every tenured industry titan will beg, 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 beg you to win the basics first. Why we try to abandon this coaching in the spirit of new technologies, it baffles me. But I digress. But where I think we potentially miss is where we say things like it's about people or teams and never take into account that will be the single most complicated input and resource the organization has. We are woefully under-equipped to tackle the people problem. Look, I Googled, there's at least 100,000 books on Amazon about people management, and there's over 2 million self-help related titles. We are an insanely complex and complicated human being. We are not just people, and we bring all that complexity and issues into our jobs every day. So we can't just say, hey, we've got a people issue. We got to get beyond that. We got to get deeper. So we got to get equipped to eat that elephant one bite at a time, if we're willing to be patient, thorough, reflective, collaborative, and cohesive. So let's start to land this plane at the bottom of the hour here. So I think solving the culture problem must be a holistic organizational objective. To me, I love three-legged stools because it needs all three legs or it can't stand. So to me, this three-legged stool, it's from corner offices to managers to our very own mirrors, and I think we all contribute very dramatically into the culture where we work, whether we believe it or not. So I'm going to take a minute to break some of these down, starting first with the company. So I believe that the company is responsible for understanding and setting the tone on the behaviors needed to drive success. And the most important thing is refusing to let good people go. They have to refuse to let good people go. Three other key pieces here. Culture and values are not built in a boardroom. Trust me, I would say I'm more on the vision side. I love good vision. I love me some whiteboards. I'm a kid in a candy store on an offsite retreat where we're thinking about solving big problems. That is not the place to invent the culture of which you want your company to be. Where you're going to find where your culture is walking your operations and seeing the behaviors of your management and production teams. Two, companies need to invest in the time in understanding what your key team members believe. Now, hang in there with me for a second. Beliefs may be the single most sticky substance in the entire world. Core beliefs, what we believe, radically inform our values, and our values inform our behaviors, and behaviors inform culture. So if you would ever take the time to ask someone, hey, what do you believe in and how has it shaped your values? Whether that's what you believe about work, what you believe about yourself, what you believe about the world, what you believe about AI, all that stuff. It's those beliefs that really generate that downline action. I mean, think about just human history. The biggest events of human history has largely been based on some high level of sticky beliefs, whether that's religion, war, territory, you name it. It is beliefs that is driving all of that. Beliefs are sticky, and we don't spend enough time as organizations really diving into our key team members' beliefs, and that's really going to predict how they act and operate. And so that ultimately gets to the third point, which kind of ties back into refusing to let good people go. Companies need to know what it takes to build a dynasty. There are far too many companies that are okay just being a 30-year wonder and off they go. But the companies that really have true staying power, staying power is actually rooted in innovation, the ability to perpetually reinvent as the whole world around us changes. But innovation requires continuity of top teams staying together. So managers in survival mode and firefighting, they're never going to get to that plane where they can level up and see the organization at a broader piece. And so you're left perpetually incrementally growing year over year rather than taking stair step growth because really talented people have stuck in there for a long period of time. And my last little caveat on this, and again, my heart goes out to HR departments who are always under-resourced, always swimming in paperwork, and yet so many organizations are just like, culture is an HR thing. We'll let HR take care of it. No, this isn't a silo for HR departments to take care of. Again, this is very much a full organizational kind of approach. And so if HR owns your culture, that's a red flag already right there. That it should be well beyond that department and up into the C-suite as well. So this actually may be the most important one. Leaders are forced to balance three key areas of their domain. To lead, so to me, that's vision and strategy. That's where you are leading your team and why. That's about building that dynastic team. Then you have to manage. And so this is about ensuring that your team is aligned to the vision and strategy, that they're executing on the tasks laid out before them, that they feel healthy in their work. So this is the opportunity to observe and understand behaviors, pattern recognitions, and then to execute, which is, task and or project completion. Now, the manager's burden, like all of us, our day starts with a battery. Sometimes it's full. Sometimes we never actually get to start our day with a full battery for a myriad of reasons, but that battery only goes one way all day long. It is only being depleted. And so the leader has to balance all three of these things on how their battery is going to deplete throughout the day. And managers inevitably get squeezed from all sides. Leadership needs results. Operations needs more throughput. And what does that do? That puts them into task mastering mode. I'm just going to drill down. I'm just going to spend all my time executing. I'm in taskmaster. I'm just going to do things myself. And yet, the other squeeze is the manager's team. They need direction. They need coaching. They need feedback. They need vision. They need accountability. And a gassed manager who is no longer operating in their own vision and their highest and best, they can't realistically provide either the organization what it needs or the team what they deserve. So now you've got that burnout and now what we call that influencer burnout, where again, 70% of people, they go as their managers go. This is why that old adage says, we never leave bad companies, we leave bad bosses or managers. But I guarantee you, if we ever took the opportunity, again, back to 80-20, no one ever sets out to be a bad boss or a bad manager. They're a victim of their circumstances, and they can't figure out how to escape it. Um, and so, if we needed a roadmap of qualities that embody a good leader, what behaviors are they walking in, day to day, for their teams and their organizations? So to me, top behaviors, strong M&R leadership, things like clarity. And environments just feel so much better when there's just clarity. You'd be surprised how many people just they get lost in the sauce. People need to remind teams need reminded often, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? All of that. From an accountability standpoint, man, talk about setting a solid precedent, especially in maintenance and reliability environments. Answer to every result, whether it's good or bad, and feel free to ask tough questions of your team. Now, that doesn't mean be a jerk about it, but that just means don't be afraid to ask tough questions, and be direct with team members. Consistency. This is another huge one. Minimize surprises, for your organization. Integrity obviously is clear. Have a development mindset. You know, have that passion to coach and teach. Embody that. Hey, we're going to try and be 1% better every day. Decisiveness. Man, it's tough when you see a boss who's in analysis paralysis mode. They get stuck in overthinking and they can't. You got too many inputs, and the team's just like, what are we doing? We're in a holding pattern here. So decisiveness is huge. Problem solving, we know what that is. Humility. We want people to lead from the bottom. We want people that want others to succeed. And then resiliency is huge too, especially in today's like really stressful environments. We want people that are outwardly headstrong in times of conflict. And so I think if you smash together consistency and resiliency, I do feel like these can be the inverse of these can be some of the biggest poisons on an organization. And I'll explain why. If you have a boss or a manager that flies off the handle, or is super cool 80% of the time, and then out of nowhere, like they blow up about something, or they get like outwardly super frustrated at team members. The worst thing that this does is it puts key team members in defense mode. Whether we like it or not, the average human, again, 80/20, we hate conflict. We are so conflict avoidant in today's world. And the second we feel like there's known conflict or the opportunity to have conflict, we will do everything possible to adjust our behaviors to minimize that. And so what that means is now leaders are getting watered down messages. They're getting more curated messages. They're not getting full versions of the truth. And that's at best. At worst, you now have all your key team members and key personnel playing on the defensive. They're going to play not to lose and not play to win, which is what we need for dynastic environments. Always be kind of on the lookout of how those things can really, really play out into an organization. And so lastly, the collective we or I in this instance will always be the last stop. At the end of the day, we are the masters of our own domain. You know, so I've given plenty of talks and have served in mentor roles, and one of the things I preach the most is self-awareness. The majority of the traps we find ourselves in, is either we don't have a good read on who we are or how we're wired, basically how we process triggers, or when we hijack ourselves to try and be something or someone that we're not. So I want to introduce you to a simple tool that was once taught to me. And I think pivoting a bit of this for this audience is going to be really helpful in this context. And it's called the Kairos circle. The Kairos, what? You ask? I'm not going to nerd out here, but in Greek, you have two words, chronos and kairos, that represent time. Simply put, chronos equals the ticks on a clock. Kairos equals moments of time. And we all know moments, right? And how we've handled key moments through our lives have really made it up the thread of who we are and where we're at. So we can use that here to learn from, so these moments can happen at any time in maintenance and reliability. But the exercise is simply this, when faced with one of these moments, we psychologically pause or stop and run a rapid mental check. And that says, hey, what do I need to know? Or what do I already know? And what am I going to do about it? And then we jump right back into that moment with a decision that drives a behavior. And so this helps us win in one of three ways. One, it helps us grow in self-awareness as practice for bigger decisions and moments down the line. It teaches us the power of pause. So most mistakes actually happen when we're moving too fast to slow our brains down to think through. That's why sales or scams ultimately feel so high pressure and urgent. They want you to make a mistake. It's what pickpockets do. They distract your frontal lobe, so you stop paying attention. And so this process can just take seconds, but those seconds actually count, I promise you. And then three, this is about rhythms. This is about building rhythms of behavior from the inside out. This is how you build the skill set to navigate through change. And this is how you manage through bad leaders and poor cultures. So let's put this Kairos circle to work by bringing up that trigger scenario from earlier. In this scene, what are some examples of how this person could process what they know and then what to do? So we're going to go back to it. Remember, person, it's the end of shift. Their angry boss is leaving. It's an issue that's crept up its head before. They're kind of frustrated by it. They've tried to bring up a root cause solve for it. It got denied. And they're also in a competitive promotion opportunity. So how would this person then kind of run this process to go through it? Well, immediately they're going to process through the triggers that they're feeling. So some examples here could be, man, my family could really use the money if I get promoted. I should take extra care here. Hey, my boss may get angry. He's not unreasonable. In fact, he'd probably get more angry if he didn't know and was asked about it and I didn't give him a heads up. And then three, I know our lube program is non-existent, but I can't get momentum there. Do I lack the context on why I keep getting no? And so with this more stabilized and self-aware baseline, they're going to behave decisively in that moment. Again, this just takes seconds, helping themselves, the companies, and their teams. They're going to slide this around. So better actions by taking that pause. He's going to grab his boss on his way out the door and say, hey, Tony, hey, I hate to hit you with this on the way out, but I didn't want you surprised. This asset's down again. I can manage its repair. I got you covered. I'll text or call you if we run into any snags or any issues. And then after Monday's shift meeting, he follows up again. He says, hey, Tony, did a root cause on that asset. It's that lube issue again. What are you seeing that I'm not on why we can't get a better lube program here? What more can I do to help? And so think about everything that this person has now done to set them up in that leadership mentality, those skills, behaviors that I was telling you about, right? This person was decisive. They were a problem solver. They were humble about it. They took a curious approach about all those things. And all those things are likely going to set this person up for better success because they're embodying, some of those better behaviors. And so don't be afraid to give this a try in a low stakes situation as a demo. This isn't anything that needs to be jotted down. This can be a mental process. You'd be surprised what you learn about yourself and your actions. And so the landing gear on our plane is coming down. Thanks for your attention here. So what are some things that you can do right now? I think you could do a behavior assessment. How does your team shape up against the top challenges of maintenance and reliability? Are those behaviors aligned with the recommended behaviors to overcome the challenges? I think if you're in a leadership role, I think you need to do a time assessment. How is your time split today between leading, managing, executing? How should it be split if you wanted to be more innovative? And then ultimately check those beliefs. Find someone to talk to. Be courageous and ask someone that you work for, hey, what do you believe in? What do you believe in about this place, our future, all of that? And you'd be surprised, what you can learn and how that can shape your success. So on that behavior assessment, we come bearing gifts today. Here's an example of a 5 to 10 minute behavior assessment that you can take with you. The goal here is to just honestly reflect where you are in addressing these common and frustrating pain points of many maintenance and reliability cultures. This can identify for you more streamlined opportunities for change management, which can be a hack to potentially shrink that pain dip of that curve if the behavior gets hyper specific and clear. So all this is doing, taking a core challenge. Here's some supporting positive behaviors and an opportunity to say, hey, 1 out of 5, where are we at on this? With an opportunity, to add some notes. And so this can really kind of streamline and pinpoint some opportunities, to help there. And so the plane is landing. We're going to hit the key points of final time. Can we take back maintenance and reliability culture? I say yes. High points from today's presentation. Statistically speaking, our modern understanding and investments into culture, they're broken. They need fixed. We must understand the nuances of the modern workforce with more choice and opportunity. It takes more effort than ever to keep employees engaged. Culture is not just people, but rather the underlying beliefs and behaviors they represent in the workplace. Behaviors can change. It just takes a lot of effort and buy-in across the organization to see it through and make it sustainable. Leaders have the greatest impact on culture and are the most often burdened in this. So make time for their highest and best. Don't get knocked off balance. Improving self-awareness can elevate any manufacturing or production environments. Get to know your triggers and how they impact your decisions in your team, and know that culture and people are not projects. This isn't dating advice. This is workplace advice, but people are not projects. There is no end. There is no beginning, middle, and end of a culture project or a people project. Make time and space and perpetuity build that dynasty. So I really appreciate your time and attention today. With that, Amissa, I will take a healthy pause here and turn it back over to
Okay. Thank you, Jeremy. That was awesome. I liked those little stick figure uh,
you.
images that you had on there because that arrow looked pointy, and I'm like, I don't really
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
cope with that. Yeah, so next I'm just going to talk about a few next steps and then we're going to get into some Q&A. So I did put our email addresses in the chat. And so if you have any questions about anything or want to talk culture or condition monitoring, feel free to email either of us. I also put links to a couple resources on our website if you want to dive more into some learnings about culture and specifically how it relates to maintenance and reliability and condition monitoring, predictive maintenance. We have some of those resources on our website. So the recording of this webinar is going to be sent out afterwards. This is an educational webinar. However, I'm going to do a little plug for UpTime Solutions. We are a condition monitoring company, and we also offer a pilot program, which is a very low risk, low barrier to entry way to try out condition monitoring for your assets. So if you're interested in learning more about that pilot program, please do email us. We'll be happy to give you more information or chat with you if needed. And then now let's get into some Q&A. All right. So if you guys have any questions, please go ahead, put it in the Q&A or put it in the chat, and I'll be reviewing any of those. Let's kick it off with one question here, though. What steps can a plant take in the next 90 days to improve culture, Jeremy?
Great. Yeah, a good friend of mine and a former colleague. I always loved his take on this. It's again back to the basics, right? Clean, inspect, lubricate. Always clean, inspect, lubricate. Extra credits if you can throw spare parts, better spare parts management into that. But basically, short and sweet. Behavior assessment on the basics above. Because again, if you're not winning in how cleanly your environment is, how effective your inspections, your PMs are, and how much your lubrication program is set up for success. Again, we know poor lubrication is the number one issue, leading to shortened life of bearings. We can actually apply those behavior assessments to this stuff, and so that gives us a really quick, easy way. Again, we're about eating the elephant one bite at a time here. We can pick one of those, focus on it, understand the behaviors needed to do this well, compare that to the behaviors today, and then build a plan to effectively march that forward.
Awesome. Robert Johnson has a great question in the chat. And he asks, what is your best advice for gaining operations team buy-in to the maintenance and reliability role and purpose? In your opinion, what is the product that M&R creates for any operation? And before you jump in, Jeremy, I will say this is something we hear a lot is that maintenance, reliability, and operations teams are often at odds or working in silos. So this is a great question that I think pretty much every plant or operation is experiencing. So what do you think, Jeremy?
Yeah, yeah. Great question. It kind of gets back to one of the opening stories, about those assets that were technically oversized, which was an engineering and operations decision. Um, and historically, how that had gone, it was just a bunch of people in opinion matches with each other. And whether we like it or not, operations typically controls throughput. Again, we're all friends here. They're going to win 9 out of 10 of those arguments because they're responsible, for driving throughput and production. And so typically the two recommendations, that I would have there is one, how quickly can you put yourself on a path of credible data to back up the impact of what, maintenance and reliability, is either where it's adding value or the lack of maintenance and reliability because of operational throughput, um, you know, pressures on the business of what it's actually costing. I mean, I was actually just at a site out west last week, where I mean, it is a very, very high production environment, and it is like a miracle to try and get planned downtime, to take care of the assets. And so one of the reasons that they want to work with us, the whole reason they brought us in there is so that we can say, hey, now we can give you the 3 month, 6 month, whatever heads up with credible data that says, here's what your asset performance looks like based on these current conditions. So let's take a look at the data to back up opinions. And then the second one is again, I know it's more of a human approach, but I would get back into, having just more honest conversations on the operational side around beliefs and behaviors. Like, hey, what pressure, is operations under? What pressure are they facing? Because again, every action that we take has some kind of trigger of why we're putting that action. So if we actually take the moment to take a posture of curiosity, hey, help me understand what's driving this. Help me understand what's driving this. I think we can actually take more of a collaborative approach there, on setting up the right behavior, because now that can be a collaborative discussion on say, okay, hey, well, how can my team, based on what we need to do, help support this initiative again, rather than just kind of taking this like cascading waterfall down. So again, data, and then having a more effective like beliefs and behaviors conversation to contextualize, that agreement.
Mm. Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. We have another good question in the chat. The exact question is, what are the three suggestions for asset reliability engineers to make the best in-class culture in a new green field site? So I am assuming this person means like maybe there's a new location or a new site, and they're trying to implement some probably good culture from the ground up, getting the site going. Do you have a few suggestions for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think first, depending on where this person is at in the organization, I think they need to go up and down the ladder, right? And so first and foremost, from the company. Now, again, depending on the size of the company, not all of us has access to, corner offices in, high rises in New York or wherever corporate headquarters are. But oftentimes we can understand how companies are wired through their quarterly reports, their strategic initiatives. So like understanding like what are they saying is important to the company? Like what does the company believe in? And so I think that sets a precipice of, okay, if we know foundationally what the company believes in, what are the initial three supporting behaviors, that can support that. So that's, if you've got a very kind of like on the nose company position, I think that's one way to look at it. If you don't, I will go back to this thing here, set yourself up to not fall into any of these traps. So in essence, think about I mean, these are the five most recognizable challenges of M&R culture. That's the reactive stuff. That's around, equipment, kind of doing old versus new. That's skill gaps. That's poor data and ecosystems. That's balancing cost and reliability. So from if you can be blessed and work against these things from day zero, start to pick three of these that feel the most relevant to you and start embodying those supporting behaviors from day zero to make sure you never actually fall into any of these traps.
That's really good advice. And then I think we have time for one more. What was the next question on the next slide that we had?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Jeremy, how can companies keep culture initiatives from fizzling out? Because we know that a lot of companies have culture initiatives and they have a lot of excitement and rah-rah behind them when they first start, and then they slowly just kind of like get pushed down to not being a priority. We see that happen all the time. So what's your advice on
I mean, if I could yell into the void here, I would be, don't ever call them an initiative.
that?
You're asking to have it fizzle out because it's an initiative, right? Human nature, and I'm the guiltiest of all. I'm an activator. I love starting new things. I hate seeing things through. I would rather go start the next thing. So we have to understand that organizations love to do this too. And so make sure it's something that feels perpetual. Like this is an ongoing thing, much like an HR program or a safety program. Safety is not an initiative, right? Safety is in perpetuity. So treat it like a safety program, right? I would say to be leery of consultants without paths to sustainability. One of my things I think, well, I think beliefs are the stickiest things in the world. I think the greatest force of the world is humans' regression to base, meaning that like we love bringing in consultants and everyone gets on a super high for like 6 months because we're doing cool things. And then the consultant extracts out, and inevitably that black hole sucks us right back to baseline. It happens so much again when we just try and like juice something without having perpetuity to it. And so the last thing, I would treat it like a snowball effect, right? Start with one thing and then let one thing be two things and three things and like let it stack upon each other. Build a foundation and let it roll. And frankly, just reduce buzzwords and corporate jargon. If a company says, hey, we've got a reliability initiative this year, I should expect everyone in the maintenance and reliability department to raise their hands and be like, what the heck does that mean? Please don't just say we have a reliability initiative for this year. Like, let's pull that down into behaviors, and everything like that to move it forward. So it's to me, this is a whole just like systematically rewrite how you tackle it. Treat culture like safety, something that you can't afford to have go away. And I think you'll have better staying power there.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. Well, I'd love to answer more questions, but we're running up on time and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So we are at the end of the webinar. So again, our emails are in the chat. There's links to additional culture resources on our website, and we'd love to hear from you. So thank you, everybody, for joining. We really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks everyone so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, bye.